In game development, things will go wrong before they go right. Someone. As some of you already know, I'm working on a turn-based RPG whose combat system is inspired by a little game called Child of Light. It's basically a system where units cast abilities in real time and can be interrupted if they're attacked during the casting phase. Well, I've spent 7 months developing this system, and unfortunately, it's time to let it go. You see, the system is by no means bad. If you play Child of Light, especially on hard mode, you'll see that most battles can be an intense struggle to outmaneuver the AI, and it's pretty enjoyable. So if the system works, why get rid of it? Well, there's a number of reasons, but in a broad sense, it's because the system isn't letting me do what I want to do. Or for my younger viewers, it just doesn't let me cook. The point of Project Bloom's combat system was to feel like a tactical and thoughtful turn-based game. I want turns to feel like they matter. So I thought having an interrupt system would allow for interesting decisions like should I interrupt this upcoming AoE or kill off a weaker target. But it didn't really play out that way. Instead, the game felt more reactionary. For example, when it was a unit's turn, you'd look at the timeline, see if there was something that can be interrupted, then go for it. It wasn't very intentional or planned. You could ask, well, why doesn't Child of Light feel this way? Well, it's because that game has a key mechanic that I just didn't want to add to my game. Child of Light has a global speed control mechanic where you can hover your cursor over an enemy, and if you spend some meter, you can decrease their speed by about 50%. So in the situation where an enemy is already casting a powerful attack, you can still reliably interrupt them by slowing them down. This makes interrupting enemies more consistent, reliable, and intentional. So the interrupts weren't as thoughtful as I wanted, and I didn't want to add the mechanics found in Child of Light. But there was another challenge that emerged when I decided to add a weakness system, and that is, how do you tie the weakness system back to the timeline system? The two might not sound related, but I'll explain. I'm an enjoyer of weakness systems that tie back to some other game mechanics. Some games like Pokemon only do damage increases for hitting weaknesses, but that's because Pokemon gets its complexity from many other decision-making factors. But other games typically combine weaknesses with another system, most commonly a stagger or a break system. Think games like Octopath, Final Fantasy Remake, or Persona 5. I toyed with the idea of adding a stagger system to Project Bloom so when an enemy gets hit by weakness, they get set back on the timeline about 25%. But that's basically the effect of an interrupt. Interrupting an enemy causes them to end their cast and get set back on the timeline. So what makes staggers different from interrupts? I played with numerous ideas, but they all came back to the same issue. Even if I decided to add more functionality to the interrupt system, there still wasn't a guaranteed tactical way of using them properly. Interrupts were very much a reactionary mechanic. Alright, so there's a couple of other reasons I'm not really loving the system anymore, like enemy designs kind of straying away from the timeline mechanics. But really, what do we do from here? I could go and make some other ideas, but I've been having this idea for the past few months that I should probably just go back to a standard RPG and introduce a turn order display. Explicitly showing the turn order allows players to plan ahead properly, while also allowing me, the designer, to come up with really interesting enemy designs not constrained by a timeline mechanic. However, I still really like the idea of casted abilities, and having stronger attacks come out a little later. It's still a bit in the experimental phase, but it's like a spell like Meteor could take 3 turns to cast as opposed to your basic attack coming out instantly. The thing is, I really spent a few days cooking up this idea just to realize it's just the Trails of Cold Steel system. Originality just doesn't exist, boys. I've tried. So we're overhauling the game back to a turn-based RPG, and notice I said back. That's because exactly 1 year ago, Project Bloom was literally a standard turn-based RPG. Then it turned into a system where during your turn you had a set amount of time to input actions inspired by Eternal Sonata. Then it turned into real-time combat similar to Lightning Returns. Then it became the Child of Light clone we're familiar with. And now it's back to turn-based combat. Again. This journey has really come full circle. When I switched to the Child of Light system, I told myself I would never change it again. And I meant it. This was it. This was the battle system I would build the game with. Originally, I felt bad for changing the combat system again because I felt like all my progress would just be reset, like I was throwing away a couple of months of work. But it's really not that big of a change if you think of the bigger picture. Sure, it might take 2 to 3 months to get the game back in a stable state, but in the past year, I've gotten way more done than just a battle system. These experimental phases really allowed me to grow as a developer. I got to try 3 different types of turn-based RPGs and learn from those design choices. I created numerous iterations of character designs, created systems for my items and route generators. I cleaned up the UI elements. added the framework for a tutorial system, learned about enemy design, and much more. As a reminder, this is my first commercial game. I've never actually gotten a game to the finish line, so there's just a lot of things I'm learning along the way. I also learned that even big budget AAA games could have multiple phases of game designs during pre-production. The end product could look nothing like what the game started as. It's just part of the creative process. However, the one thing I think I do lack is the ability to fail fast. I need to get better at prototyping ideas. I might have been able to make the decision to switch battle systems in a month or two and not spend 7 months developing it. But whatever the case is, we're here now and all we can really do is keep marching forward. With that said, I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you'd like to see my approach for improving enemy designs in Project Bloom, you can check out this video here. Additionally, you can wishlist Project Bloom on Steam. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.